Hi, folks. This is Paresh Motiwala from Boston, and today we're going to have an awesome chat by my friend Chris Lumna, who also happens to be from the same area. He's going to be talking about taking the pain out of database migration. I think this is basically teaching us how to deal with DBAs, I guess. So, can we go to the next slide, Chris? So, we must thank our sponsors, Quest and SUSE or SUSE. Without the sponsors, it is difficult for us to bring these things over. Chris, thank you. So the past the past summit is coming up in October, and I mean November 6th through 9. It's awesome. You will never have learned so much in such a little time. So I strongly recommend that you come there. And if you use the discount code, which is given in the next one, the VGDISC G0E, you can actually get $150 off, which means you can pay your Uber back and forth the airport to the venue. And then also, if you want to go ahead and get all the streaming access to last year's PASS Summit, you can go to this website, pass.org, and register. I mean, use this code to go and download these access there. So, I mean, all the content. And the next one, sir. So, feel free to nominate your neighborhood volunteers or people from this virtual group. Maybe it could be Sharon Dooley or me or Chris or anybody for that matter who you think has made a huge difference for the community. Do nominate their name for the Passion Award. It is real and it would mean a lot for them to be recognized. So thank you for doing this and please continue. So there are only about 36 groups that we have mentioned here, the virtual groups. Feel free to select any one of them. I have the pleasure of working with this group, the PASS Professional Development Group, and a couple of local groups here in Boston too. So go ahead, Chris. So what are the SQL Saturdays coming up? That SQL Saturdays, for those who don't know, are a day of free training where 100% volunteer driven, spoken at and organized by volunteers. Most of them are Microsoft MVPs in data platform or Azure or VMware or whatever, but they're all really heavy duty people. You definitely want to go and attend their sessions. The next one is coming up in the next month or so, are given to you on the left side here in US and Canada, whereas for Europe and Middle East on the right side. August 25th is in Brazil and Sao Paulo again in September 29. So yes, Chris, next, sir. So join PASS, grow your careers. I know a lot of you are contemplating, why should I do these kind of trainings online? Just one thing, you can do this during your lunch break. It's free and you can get your questions answered without any hassles. The speakers are great. Chris is great today. So Chris, one next slide, please. So these are multiple ways in which you can connect with PASS. There's also a SQL Saturday Facebook group. So if you are on Facebook, do connect with us on the SQL Saturday Facebook group. Yes, sir. Next, please. And presenter, our star of the day is Chris Lumna. And Chris began working in the IT industry as a programmer in 1996. Does that give your age away, Chris? He ended up becoming a SQL DBA out of necessity. So what I think somebody called as an accidental DBA 10 years ago.
He actually is more than that now. It's actually about 15 years.
So how about giving us an updated intro, man? Oh, God.
I thought I did update that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Then we can blame it on Sharon. So he has worked on SQL Server versions 2000 to 2017, and he likes to continue to use his knowledge of programming to create more automated solutions to assist him and his team to be more proactive and productive. He lives in Providence, Rhode Island. He's my Spider-Man, the friendly neighborhood guy, and is a current SQL Server Solutions architect with Rubrik Inc. Also, me and Chris go a long way back. We speak at a lot of these events together, Providence, Boston, Albany, Rochester, New York, you just name it. So without much ado, let's go ahead to the next one, my friend. I think this should be the last one.
That is the last one.
Yes. So it's all yours now. So take it away. And folks, if you have any questions, Chris encourages you to ask them as and when they come up. And I'm looking at the questions panel, and I shall intervene and do the necessary and get you the best possible answers. If not, Chris will definitely mail them to you. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for doing this, my friend.
Thank you, and everybody. Thank you guys for taking time out of your busy day or your lunch to do this session with me. Today we're going to talk about taking the pain out of database migrations. A lot of this is actually from my own personal experience doing migrations and the lessons I've learned. So I'm kind of pass this information along the way, and hopefully it helps you. As I said, or actually as Price said earlier, I'm a SQL Server Solutions Architect with Rubrik. I've been with Rubrik since January of this year, but previous to that, I spent my last 15 years as a production database administrator, managing all different types of environments, whether it be consulting or actually managing a very, very large financial environment. I'm a big proponent of PowerShell. I want to use it to automate everything because the DBA has so many things that needs to get done throughout the day that automating things just helps us make the day go by better. And I started my career as a developer, so I understand a lot of the things that developers do and can relate to them as they go ahead and do the things that they do. So what are we going to talk about today? And this slide is not advancing. There we go. So why is this? All right.
Something wrong, buddy?
Yeah, the controls are not really working as well as I would expect them to, but I think we're okay now. So here's the agenda we're going to talk about today. First thing is just to talk about why migrate. We're going to talk about the checklist that I've kind of come up with that I'm happy to share with everybody. Then the areas of the checklist itself, the discovery section, the stuff you do to prepare for the migration, what you do for the week before the migration, and what to do the day of the migration. And I will say that the stuff that you do the week before the migration is loosely the week before, and we'll talk about that. It's more of just a way to make sure that things are prepared for the day of. So why migrate? I mean, coming up with a reason to migrate should be easy at this point. I mean, we have the fact that SQL 2000 is no longer supported. SQL 2005 is no longer supported. SQL 2008 and 2008 R2 are end of life as of July of next year. Those are big proponents to migrate right there. So if you're on an unsupported OS or you're on an unsupported data platform, consider moving to the later versions of SQL. Okay. Maybe you're on aging hardware, and if you're on aging hardware, you want to go ahead and refresh that hardware. Well, at the same time, refresh the OS and refresh the database platform. Take advantage of that hardware and get faster speeds out of your database. Maybe you want to take advantage of new HA requirements that have come along. If you're still using database mirroring, maybe it's time to look at something like always on availability groups and look at the power that gives you versus mirroring. And then a lot of times it's just business reasons. Business goes off and buys a new application, and that new application has new requirements that you need to go ahead and support. So the checklist. This is something that I've kind of come up with. I actually sat in front of customers and done a similar checklist to what I'm going to show you guys today. And it's the things that I normally do when I do a migration. Okay, I have 4 areas of the migration checklist that we're going to go over. The idea of the checklist is that it should be broad enough to cover every condition in the environment, even though it necessarily may not cover every condition, but that's where the next point of it being a living document comes into play. As you come up with a condition that you didn't know about before, add it to the document and never let that bite you again. And it should be applicable to a single database or all the databases on the server. And what I mean by that is if you're migrating a database or a database server, you're basically doing it to help migrate the application. Well, if that application uses one database, the migration process is the same if it uses 10 databases. Just a few extra steps that have to come in along the way. So the 4 areas of the checklist that I'm going to go into today is discovery, migration preparation, migration week, and the migration day. And the idea is that as you progress from each area, when you get to the migration day, you should be sitting back, running a few scripts, and having a very easy time of things because you've done all of the preparation work and you know about everything that's going to happen for that migration day itself. So, first thing is, from a discovery perspective, you have to answer some very, very basic questions. How many SQL servers do you have? What versions of SQL Server do you have? How many databases do you have? Who are the users that are interacting with those databases? Who are the owners of those databases and those applications? And how many databases that you have in the environment that may not even be used anymore? That happens occasionally when applications kind of just go stale and the database just sits there and nobody knows what it's used for anymore. It kind of just sits there because everyone's too afraid to get rid of it. Well, utilizing this first link right here, the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, or better known as MAPS, it's a tool that Microsoft put out that allows you to just go ahead and scan your environment, and it will give you an inventory of your SQL servers, as well as your databases and the sizes and a bunch of different information about the databases and their servers. Okay, that'll help answer a bunch of these questions that we have here. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually show you one of the outputs of the database or of the MAPS toolkit. So you should be able to see a spreadsheet here. So this spreadsheet that I have here is the output of the MAPS toolkit. And this is one of the first things you're going to look at. It's going to list off what the server names you have in your environment. It's going to list off the instances. And if you notice here in this column, I have some named instances. I have some default instances. I also have my product name and my SQL version and the service pack and the edition that's there. And I've kind of put a little highlight above this column just because those things are important to me. And the reason why they're important to me is because this will help me figure out what may be my prioritization. Maybe I don't care about developers because that's sitting on someone's workstation. So I don't need to migrate that. I can just tell that person, they need to go ahead and take care of that. Or if it's enterprise, I want to take a look at what features are going to be in play on that server. Maybe if it's an updated version of SQL and in-memory OLTP is involved or some other type of enterprise feature, I want to know about it so I can make sure I properly take care of it later. If it's Express, that's probably meaning it's sitting on someone's desktop and I may not necessarily have to deal with it at all. Additionally, if I'm using my SQL Server version here, maybe I want to use this as my priority to say this is what I'm going to attack first and order this by version. This way I can go ahead and attack my 2000s and my 2005s and my 2008s first because I know that 2012 is not going to be end of life for a little while later, and attack the ones that are already out of support now. Additionally, I want to scroll over and I want to look at other things here on the spreadsheet, like what version of Windows are they on? If I'm on Windows 2003, I need to get off that platform as soon as possible. If I'm on Windows 2008, I want to look at getting off of that soon too, because that will also be end of life as of next year. And if I look at some of these other guys like Windows 7, Windows Vista, and Windows 8 or Windows 10, that tells me that they're most likely a developer or a desktop instance of SQL. So maybe I don't have to necessarily deal with these guys right away. I can push those guys off to the end or work with that developer to move them to a later version. Additionally, I'm going to see the OS architecture type, whether it's 64-bit or 32. I'm going to see how many processors, total number of cores. This gives me my power of the box, and I can look at this to figure out what's my next box going to be. And maybe I can also look at this for some information about possible consolidation. If I have 200 SQL servers, but I only need 100 because I'm over allocated, I can use this information to help me figure that out. I have my memory, I have my storage, I have some basic information about my storage here, so I can see overall what the size of my server is. And then another big piece of information, which I don't necessarily have highlighted here, but it's important, is it virtual or physical? Well, I don't have it highlighted, mainly just because a migration is a migration. If it's not a big deal if it's virtual or physical, but a physical box may be something that you want to prioritize over a virtual machine. Additionally, when you start looking at your databases, okay, this is another output of the Maps toolkit. This is going to let you see the server that the database exists on, the database name, the size of the database. Okay, this is going to be valuable information because this, if you look at this, you know that this database here is only 5 gigs, so it's going to be fairly easy to move because it's not a very big database. But if I had something here that was maybe 15 gigs or 150 gigs or 1.5 terabytes, well, that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge to move. So I have to do some thinking on that, on how I'm going to move it over later on. Additionally, if I did a proper scan of this, I would see my compatibility level. Maybe I'm looking at this 2012 database and seeing that it's in compatibility level for 2005. Why? It's a question I want to ask. It's something I want to understand as I migrate it to a later version. If the scan actually produced the output here and I saw the owner of the database, I would also see that here, and that might help me know who to ask to talk to them about the possible migration. Okay. So in the discovery section, like I said, we're talking about identifying the servers, the databases, and their owners. We also want to look at the supporting database objects. We want to look at things, and actually I'm going to switch over to my spreadsheet here to kind of go over the things that I look for. What jobs are out there? How many jobs are related to the databases that I need to migrate? What logins are related to the databases that I'm going to be migrating as well, because I want to make sure that I move those over. At the same time, if I'm looking at logins here, this is a perfect time to clean up the security. You don't do it on the old box, you do it on the new box. They're forced to automatically be in a testing mode. Now you can go ahead and clean up those logins for users that left the company 5 years ago, but people forgot to clean up. Maybe it's a time to move people to AD groups versus individual Active Directory logins. Things like that to think about. If you're coming from SQL 2000, are there DTS packages that have to be converted? If you're coming from later versions of SQL, are there SSIS packages that should be converted as well? Now here I have listed kind of who is the owner of this, and this is mainly because a DBA may not necessarily be the owner of SSIS DTS packages. That could be the application team, because they're the ones who wrote those packages and understand how they work, and they're going to be involved in this migration process heavily. Okay. Additionally, I want to ask questions about if this is a third-party app versus homegrown. If it's third-party and I talk to the vendor and the vendor says I can't migrate off that SQL 2005 box, I'm kind of stuck. I don't want to go in. I don't want to go into a situation with my vendor where I'm no longer supported by them, but I also want to make sure I can get them to move too. So I may have to have some conversations with them to get maybe updated versions of the software or figure out what my next steps will be with them. If it's homegrown, that makes it a lot easier because I have the in-house talent to go ahead and make whatever changes are involved. I also want to understand if there's DTC involved. I want to understand if there's multiple types of servers involved. If there's different applications, if there's more than one SQL server involved for my production environment, or if I need one for test, production, dev, UAT, things like that. I want to understand that and kind of get an understanding of how the application is all working. I also want to ask about some special considerations. Now, special considerations, it's not limited to these ones that I have here. You may end up finding out that there's much more in your own environment that you want to consider. But SharePoint requires max.stop equal to 1. I can't get around it. So I have to make sure that I carry that value over. Is there a specific collation that is needed for that application? That's going to affect my downstream actions, because maybe I have to create a SQL server with that one specific collation for that one application, and I can't put other applications there because it'll be a conflict. Is there, and this is the one I hate and I don't like at all, but is there an application that requires the use of the SA account? I want to understand this, and I want to know why, and I want to make sure I can provide a good solution to this, but maybe also lock down the server to not have to use this every day, but I want to understand this up front. This one I added in there because I got bit by this, okay? I had an application, it was a call center application that said they could not put their database on mount points for SQL. Didn't understand why. There was no rhyme or reason or any information given me why they couldn't do it, but I had to make sure that I had to use physical drives for my database files instead of using mount points. Didn't make any sense to me, but that was their requirement. I had to make sure I followed it. The next thing is probably one of the most crucial things out there, okay? And that's a test plan. The test plan has to be done by the application SME, not the DBA. The DBA can come up with their own test plan to understand if there's connectivity, if queries are working, if things look okay from their side of the house. But they are not necessarily responsible for knowing what good looks like from the application point of view. Only application teams can know that because they work with the application on a day-to-day basis. So the application SMEs, they have to be involved here in creating that test plan and figuring out what will be the success criteria. And then there's just a bunch of other things down here that I want to go ahead and ask. Things like linked servers, any weird security consideration, firewall rules that are necessarily coming from servers in a DMZ, if they're coming from just weird places in the network that need those ports opened, I want to understand that and make sure that they can get requested soon. Any maintenance windows, so I can make sure I can do this this migration during certain times of the day or a certain weekend or whatever. I want to understand my storage requirements. I want to understand if there's replication involved, because I'm probably going to have to set that up later on. Special drivers that are installed on the SQL server. I'm thinking about things like Informix. To do things with Informix, they needed a special driver on the SQL server so they could do things like SSIS packages to bring data from an Informix database into SQL for processing. I want to understand that and put that on my box.
Hey,
Is there a
quick question for you though. One of the things that we have done successfully in the past and lived longer because of that was to actually benchmark the applications too. So, because almost after every single migration, the standard complaint is it's very slow. So, just kind of adding that.
Yes, that is something that will always come up right afterwards, but that is also something that can get fleshed out during the later parts of this plan, where you start doing dry runs and you actually do tests of the application to help make sure that that doesn't happen. But having the benchmark handy can tell you right up front that no, the application's working fine. There's something else going on. I also want to ask the question if there's third-party backup solutions that are there. I'm thinking about things like BizTalk, because that's going to cause some issues. I need to make sure that if I have a product like that that requires me to do backups in a certain way and the only supported way, I need to make sure I take that into consideration when I set things up on the other side, maybe I can't just go ahead and deploy my standard set of backup scripts and my standard set of backup jobs. I need to put that in place. Lastly, I want to look at DNS entries. Are there any there? Because I want to make sure I get them switched over. And if they're not, maybe I want to put some in. Okay. It's a lot easier to start now to have all my clients pointed to a DNS entry and have them point to the old server now. And then on migration day, you make one change in DNS and all your clients automatically start working over to the new server, as opposed to having on migration day, go to every single client that requires it and have them change to the new SQL server. So as I get into my migration prep area, first thing I want to do is I want to run the upgrade advisor. Now it's actually been called the data migration assistant. It's going to go through, scan your database, and tell you potential problems that you're going to have with code. And this is meant to help highlight things like the old join strategies. Maybe you're going to an older version of SQL and a new version of SQL, and the feature that you're currently using is deprecated. It kind of helps highlight that so you can go ahead and figure out what changes you need to make before you actually turn this over to the users. What are your HA requirements? What are they now versus what are they going to be with the new environment? If right now you're using log shipping, great. Are you going to continue to use that? Or are you going to use something like failover clustered instances? Are you going to use availability groups? All those things you want to work out during this migration prep area. You want to work with the dev teams and the application SMEs to assist in the migration work that they have to do. Remember, you just asked a bunch of questions about SSIS packages. They may not be they may be the application owners, but they may not necessarily have the skills to do the SSIS work because the people who originally wrote it aren't there. So you might have to help guide them a little bit. You might have to help do some of that work and work with those teams to get things going. You want to start getting your new servers prepped, ordering any new VMs, creating the firewall rules, getting the storage allocated. A lot of times, those processes, due to business processes, take a long time to do. So if you have a lead time of 2 weeks to get a single VM created with all the storage and everything installed, ready to go, you want to make sure you understand that and you build that into your date of when you're actually going to do the migration later on down the road. If there's firewall rules you need to get put in place, this is where you start asking for those things now. You're going to make your dev changes. You're going to go ahead and start creating your linked servers, start running your tests for those SSIS packages and so on. The next thing is migration week. Now, migration week is loosely defined here. Normally, I usually have to do migrations on a weekend, so I want to start doing a bunch of prep work that week to get things done. Okay. Now, those things that I want to get done are copying my supporting objects from my database over to the new server. So I should have all my SSIS packages ready to go. I should be able to go ahead and create my availability groups. I don't need a database to put into the availability group. I can create the availability group and my listeners ahead of time. If there are firewall rules that need to get put in place, those should be tested during this migration week. If I'm doing large databases, how am I going to move them from point A to point B? I can use database mirroring. I can use log shipping. I can use fulls and diffs and transaction log backups later on. But if I'm going to do that, I need to start doing the full backups now during this migration week and the restores, because it could take a long time to get those processes done. And then later on, when I'm doing the migration itself, I can leave those databases in recovery and just do the differential or just do the small changes that have happened since then. Maybe if I'm doing log shipping, finalize the log backups and flip things around. If I'm doing mirroring, maybe I'm doing, setting it offline on the old server and bringing it online on the new server, and I'm good. I also want to do, during this time frame, I want to do a dry run test. I want to check, do things work the way that they're expected to work. Okay, I should be able to go ahead and work with my SMEs and kind of set up like a little test area and point a subsection of users over to this new server and say, hey, do things work the way they're supposed to work? Are we getting any error messages that we're not familiar with? Are link servers set up in the way that they're supposed to be to make sure that things are working all the way across like they normally do now? If not, this is where you go back through and start fixing some of those little problems. You find out this stuff during your dry run, and hopefully not during the later things. Here is also where you're going to start prepping your scripts and your automation. Okay, you're going to go ahead and create your backup scripts. You're going to create your restore scripts. You should already have a script of all the security that is needed for that migration. All the logins ready, all the users ready to go into their respective databases. Everything's ready to go, and you're actually just creating a migration day script that you're basically just going to hit F5 on later on, and everything's just going to go. If you're using database mirroring, you want to have that automatic failover or those scripts to condition the failover ready to go as well. On migration day, what I normally do from a migration day perspective is at the appropriate time, the SMEs will go ahead and close the application. They stop it from new users coming into the environment. We go ahead, we check to make sure there's no further transactions coming through, and then we freeze the database from any further transactions. The way I normally do it is I will set the database to read-only. This now locks my database in a read-only state and allows me the ability to go ahead and move this to the new server or copy it to the new server and use it, my read-only database on my old server as my failback if I need to later. At this point, when my database is frozen, I'm also going to go ahead and take my final backups, get those copied over to the new server, get those restored to the new server, whether it's a log shipping or mirroring or whatever. This is where I'm doing that final set of backups and restores. But I'm also going to take the database offline. And the big reason why I do that is because if I take the database offline and the migration goes ahead and happens, and someone comes to me after I've gone ahead and turned the databases online on the new server, they can't get in, I can go easily troubleshoot that by looking at the old server and seeing if I get a login failure. If I get a login failure, that means that particular person is not pointed to the right server. So either maybe their DNS didn't get refreshed, maybe their client didn't get changed over to use the new address, or whatever. I can troubleshoot that much easier now. I want to run any type of post-upgrade scripts that I may want to run. This is going to include things like re-indexing my databases, updating my stats, maybe recompiling stored procedures, maybe running through a DBCC checkDB against those databases to ensure that they're not corrupt and they're in good standing before I go ahead and turn it over to the user. I want to run things like maybe with DBCC checkDB with data purity, make sure my data is all good. I want to do all these things to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm giving my users a good experience for that migration. Now, again, ideally, with everything here for this migration, this should all be scripted out. This should all be automated. You can either write all these scripts yourself using T-SQL or use things like DBA Tools. DBA Tools was a project that started off by Chrissy Lemaire, who's a SQL Server MVP and a PowerShell MVP, and it was her project that started off as a migration tool. She did not want to have to sit there and do migrations in a long, drawn-out fashion, so she wrote PowerShell scripts to do that for her, and they work great. That little project of database migrations turned into what DBA Tools is today, with all the community adding more scripts and more functionality on a day-to-day basis. Just going through this a little bit more, again, I'm going through all these different tasks here for my migration prep, my migration week, and all these different tasks down here for my migration day, all of this can be scripted out. All this can be automated. All of this can be tested ahead of time, and doesn't necessarily all have to be done. It's kind of up to you to figure out what task you want to do during the migration day, and it's going to be up to you to figure out what tasks should be done based on your previous questions in your discovery and your migration preparation areas. So lastly, the ways to remove the pain from migration is create your checklist. This checklist that I've created is actually available. I put it out on GitHub. I can give you guys the link for this. Sharon actually has this as well, so she can post it out to the community. Oops. Document everything that you're doing along the way. If you come up with a condition that I haven't come up with because I haven't seen it, add it to the checklist. Use it. Don't get burned by the same thing each time you're doing a database migration. Because if you get burned by the same thing more than once, your users are going to lose faith in you, and they're going to be much more hesitant to allow you and give you the outage window to move their database to a new version because of previous actions. You want to make sure you communicate clearly and often with the owners of the databases, those application SMEs, and work with them side by side and deal with things as they come up and make sure that they don't fall in to the migration day because you've already taken care of them before that happened. And lastly is automate everything. Write your scripts, get them prepared. As you do one migration, you're going to notice that you're going to be doing similar steps the same way. Use those scripts over again. Come up with a process that helps you automate that process right all the way through. Basically, as a DBA, sit back on migration day, hit F5, and let the process work. Okay? Because you've done all the work ahead of time. You've worked out all the bugs and all the problems ahead of time during your testing, during your preparation, and during your dry runs, that when you actually get to the day of the migration, it's piece of cake. Again, you look at DBA tools, look at the scripts they have there for automating the migration. And lastly, thank you for hearing me out today. Any questions?
I don't see any question. There are a few common themes that I can check with you, see if it makes sense to you. Will
Sure.
this list be available for download? Will this
Yes.
session material be available for download, etc., etc.? And I said yes. On
Yep.
the same website, would Chris also be talking about AWS or / Azure migration today? And I said I doubt it. The other
Well,
thing is, have
I
you ever
don't
done?
I don't see much of a difference in process from going to a cloud versus going to an on-prem database. Yes, there's going to be some additional steps that have to come into play there, but those are going to be based on, like, if you're migrating from on-premise up to Azure, you're going to use Backpack versus, or maybe some replication up
Correct.
to those things. So those are process based.
Hmm.
But the emphasis on things is making sure to look at that discovery section and ask as many questions as possible, flush things out ahead of time.
So one of the things is, I think most people forget is to involve all stakeholders. I think that
Yes,
is a key part of this too, right? I mean, what you're saying is do this, do that, right? And as you can see, a lot of what you are doing involves multiple teams.
it
And
does.
that is why I think that getting their blessings, including something as stupid as, talking to the vendor, is your software even supported on this ambitious migration plan that I have, right? And half the time they say, oh, yeah, we are not yet equipped to do that. So,
Hmm.
so that
And
is,
that's why in my searching here, I actually put in who I think the owners of these individual things are. It's not necessarily that the owner is the SME of jobs. It's more of they may not be the ones doing the work of scripting the jobs out and bringing them over to the SQL
Mhm.
Server, but they're going to know about this. They're going to know what logins they have and can interact with you and let you know so you can prepare what needs to get done further down the road. So this is
Okay,
heavily working with the SME.
correct. So then one person has actually gone on. I think her name is Crystal Harold, and she's saying that it would also be nice to have like a point in your migration plan to say go no go, and what happens if we have to roll back, um, and who takes that as decision. How do you escalate that? So that I will include in my talk, Chris, definitely when I'm going to be
So
doing a migration to Azure as a project management approach.
I will
Then
say that at those points for go no go happen at different times.
yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, so you may find out that in your migration preparation section here,
Hmm.
you can't do it because you don't have the storage or you don't have the buy-in or there's things preventing you from doing it just in this section here. So
Hmm.
you have a no-go at this section.
Okay.
Later on, you may have the same type of thing down here
Hmm.
where during your dry run, you may realize, oh my God, we have a lot of problems with this application if we move it to version,
X.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's where you do stuff down here. And there has to be, that's where that communication comes in. And at the same time, different points, different people can also make that same decision. The
Correct.
DBA needs to be able to make that decision for things that they find as problems, and they need to be able to pull back when they need to pull back. And at the same time, the SME, because they know what good looks like on their application, needs to also be able to say the same thing. And that is why I put up here, this is very crucial because the SME understands what good looks like. And
Yes,
if they don't like
absolutely.
it,
Totally understandable.
you got to
So
pull
then
back.
there's another gentleman who's saying, Stephen Wheeler, saying, what is the best tool for moving SQL Server jobs, packages? I mean, what we have done in the past, Chris, is just basically take a backup of MSDB and dump it there. So,
Yeah, the only thing is MSDB doesn't store packages anymore.
yes,
It
that is true.
stores SSISDB.
Hmm.
Um, Moving SSISDB, I don't know if is necessarily the right decision because you may want to go ahead and take a look at the packages and update them to the new version of Visual Studio. Take advantage of
Individually.
the
Yes,
functions that are
exactly. Mhm.
happening in Visual Studio. So that's kind of where the SMEs need to come in play.
Yeah.
They may find out that there's new functionality that they want to take advantage of that makes their process go much faster and much simpler.
Then here's a classic question. I, I mean, I don't know why their network admin wants to do this. I hope that admin is on the call, but they're saying they want to do an in-place upgrade of the operating system. And I'm already screaming saying, don't do that.
I No DBA will ever recommend doing an in-place upgrade of the OS or of
Mhm.
SQL Server.
Correct.
Your cat one, you just lost your rollback position. You
Yes,
have no way of going back.
correct.
So the plan that I have here is all about going forward and going to new servers because if something were to happen at any point along this time frame, especially on migration day, I can just go ahead, set my databases to read write and bring it back online on the old server, point my DNS back to
Sorry, you kind of blanked out. Chris, you still there? Okay. I think I will continue with that answer. I don't know what happened to Chris. Um, so essentially, when Shu, thank you for the question. I would strongly recommend that you talk to your boss and let him or her deal with this. Don't do it. Unless it's a VM and they're going to take the snapshot of that VM and then check out everything, then it's a different thing. But, anyways, I would strongly recommend not doing it. And because I have never done this, or neither has Chris, we really don't know what it will do to your SQL Server. Because remember, some of the paths for the binaries change, some of the places where you might store some of your packages or temp DB files. A lot of these things might change if you go. I mean, the permissions are pretty bad in Windows 2012. So a lot of this thing may not work because your agent account or your SQL Service account doesn't have access to certain new folders according to Windows 2012. Then Crystal Harold has made a comment saying that adding a timeline to the migration would really help, and what time we are starting, how long it would take, etc. So Crystal, what we do is that I very highly recommend that this is like the overall, this is like your GPS kind of thing for small street level guidance. We actually have like on the migration day, as you see, from line 56 to 77 may actually become line 56 to literally 300. So that you might get more granular in that stage and actually create your own little spreadsheet for that. And that is something that you definitely want to take care of. Um, Also, you've gone on to say that this helps with the scheduling, the resources, and how to align. Yes, and then in the end, scheduling of testing of the application. I totally agree. And this helps when the aligning multiple contributors, customers. Yes. So this is exactly what we do, and we call it as a playbook here. In previous companies, we used to call it as the deployment plan. So yes, 100% agree with you, Crystal, on that. So uh, absolutely, we should create a new tab for that. And somebody, I think Stephen Wheeler, has gone on to say that I have used a DMA not too long ago, and it worked great at a move database, at moving databases and users. Yes, I totally agree with you. So yes, you are on the right page, Crystal. So if anybody has any more questions, I really don't know what happened to Chris. Chris, you still there, buddy? Or am I the only one who's talking? I see you're green. Okay, it must be the DBA moment. So definitely, folks. So if you are on Twitter, please go ahead and tweet about this session. Our our handle, I'll just give it to you in a second. Give me a pass underscore DBA underscore VC. That's our. I'll put it here. Pass. Yes. So this is our handle. Please go tweet about it. And Chris's handle is at Lumna, and I am at Paresh Moriwala. So if you like this and if you like to see more of similar content, please feel free to reach out to us either through any of these three handles. We will definitely try our level best to accommodate all the requests that come across our way. So if you don't have any more questions, I would love to call it a day. And okay, give me 1 sec. I think Chris just called. Hey, Chris, what happened? But you sure? So sorry, guys. Chris's modem apparently just completely died, so he couldn't do much about it. So, um, well, I don't see any more questions for now. So, guys, thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to your continued attendance and patronage of our virtual group. Oh, is that you back?
It is. I apologize. My
Yeah.
cable modem had a brief outage and lost all internet access.
Yeah, you want to migrate it. Take the pain out of migrating from one modem to another. Cool.
I did want to make sure I shared the link to my GitHub with the presentation in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think you have a fan club here. They actually responded with your um, GitHub location.
okay. I don't know if
Yeah,
I've
Joseph Kroschel. Anybody you know?
no, I don't think so.
I think they say github.com/cliumna/presentations. Is that correct?
Yes,
Oh,
that is
gee,
it.
this is scary. So you have a stalker too. Cool.
Maybe. Oh,
Okay.
well, I did write some code a while ago to install SQL Server using
Okay.
DSC,
Hmm.
and I blogged about that a while ago.
Okay. So yeah, I just posted that in the question and answer session. So we are at about 12:50 now, Chris. So if I don't see any other questions,
Were there
anybody
any
else?
questions that didn't get
Yeah.
answered?
Yes, I think there's a whole bunch of thank yous here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I gave your Twitter handle, my Twitter handle, and the past DBA virtual chapter um, Twitter handle. And I hope they actually respond that what a great moderator I was and what a great speaker. So,
Awesome. Well,
okay.
thanks
Okay, there's
for
one more. I think one more just came up.
sure.
Oh, no, that was you who just posted that thing. Okay, cool.
If any further questions come up,
Sweet.
they can reach out to me via email or Twitter or whatever, and I'm happy to answer.
Actually, do you want to share your contact information again on this thing? You're still the presenter? I do believe you are the presenter. We still have some
So
time.
what's weird is that you are looking at a screen that is not there.
Ah, so I'm going to do this, make you the presenter, and see if it comes out to you. Are you able to present it now?
Hold on 1 second. There we go. You should see
So
my contact info.
this would be a good place for you to put your GitHub location too, Chris.
Yeah, I got to add that in there.
Yep.
Like the GitHub one was actually a recent addition. I figured it'd be a good place to share this checklist was out there.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So
So thank you, Chris. Enjoy your vacation, and I will see you on the 22nd September for Boston SQL Saturday.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Have a awesome rest of the day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye bye.